Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Jeffrey and this is AutoAlchemy, and today I'm doing a bit of a spontaneous video. I don't really know what I'm gonna say before I say it. I usually live that way, but when I'm gonna film a video, I try to script it a little bit so that I don't have to subject you to too much of my chaotic monkey brain. Today you might get a heaping helping of the chaotic monkey brain because today I'm going to be talking through some observations and thoughts that I've recently been having on the distinction between thinking versus feeling in not just objective personality terminology, but in Jungian typology in general. So let's talk about it. Something that I've talked about before on my channel is this idea that thinking and feeling are both rational functions. This is a distinction, oh my god, that siren. This is a distinction that comes directly from Carl Jung himself in his work Psychological Types. That's basically how he defines thinking and feeling. He calls them rational functions in contrast with intuition versus sensing, which are irrational functions. And I think it's easy to see, especially from a modern standpoint, why you might think that feeling should not qualify as a rational function. Most people might think that feelings are very messy, feelings are very ugly. In what sense can they be called rational when especially when they're existing in contrast with the thinking function? These things exist as part of a binary, as part of a polarity. So it is a little odd to think of them as both sharing something under this umbrella of rational. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. In what respect are the feeling functions and feeling in general to be considered rational? I think that we live in a culture where clearly thinking as a general approach is more highly valued. The thinking functions are more generally cherished because, well, thinking functions are good for figuring things out, for getting the job done, for solving problems. And we live in a society where capitalism is sort of a dominating force. It makes sense that most people are expected to put aside their personal feelings, put aside values for the sake of getting the job done. So we live in a society where the feeling functions are devalued. And I think in general that contributes to the perception that feeling therefore must be irrational. When things are repressed, they can become contaminated with other features of the unconscious. What does that exactly mean? Well, there's a particular lecture that Jung did where he was talking about this very topic. How is feeling a rational function? And in that lecture, he talks a little bit about how it's very easy to see why people who are thinkers might perceive things that way. For thinkers, for let's say lead thinkers especially, the feeling function is going to be especially repressed. It's going to be, in the original parlance, the inferior function. So as the inferior function, it's going to be swimming down there in this realm of the personal unconscious and in the realm of the archetypes. It's just basically the place where all the things that are repressed are going to bubble. I've called it a cauldron in the past. So the feeling function is contaminated with a bunch of ickiness in the shadow, in the personal shadow, the collective shadow, all the things you've personally repressed, all the things that the culture around you is attempting to repress. And so it's all going to get a little bit muddied and muddled, and as a result, yeah, of course the feeling function is not going to be operating in a highly developed, differentiated way. It's just going to happen in an unconscious capacity. It's going to be as if the feeling function is happening to the thinkers. They don't have control over it. It overtakes them. It's like a storm. It's like an external force. That's personally how I relate to my own emotions. I don't often live in a headspace where my emotions or my values are taking precedence. And so at a certain point, because that's something that is getting funneled out, it's building up on the outside of this funnel, suddenly it can't be ignored anymore. It demands to be noticed because the psyche is inherently in this state of seeking out homeostasis. So things eventually show up at your door and they claim your attention. They refuse to be repressed anymore. Thinkers in general are going to experience feeling in that way. The rational aspect of feeling is also going to be lost because it is contaminated with this general irrationality of the unconscious. I think that's the best way of looking at it. took me a while to get there. And so in any case, that's one way of looking at it. And so as a result, if this is the way that it functions for thinkers in general, that the feeling function is getting contaminated with all of this extra gunk from the unconscious, if that is a similar dynamic that's playing out at a cultural level, then we're going to have this sort of fractal self-similarity going on where even in our culture broadly speaking, that's how we're going to perceive feeling. In any case, I think that's partially why we perceive feeling in general as being irrational. But if you think about it, and this is something that I've noticed by watching people in the objective personality classes who are typed savior feeling, I can kind of come to understand in what respect you can think of feeling as being a rational function. So a lot of the savior feelers are able to speak in a relatively calm, quote unquote, savior state about things like, oh yeah, when I made that movie, I was feeling very hurt, or I was feeling irritated, I was feeling annoyed, I was feeling betrayed. It's not merely that they are able to say these things. Clearly, everybody feels annoyed, betrayed, whatever at some point in life. It's about the rapidity with which they are saying these things. They're clearly paying attention to it enough that they're able to talk about it at a quick rate without a lot of processing in the moment. I might, and I very often have started a sentence trying to explain how something made me feel, and in that explanation, I get kind of caught up. It's like I stumble over something. It's like, oh yeah, I remember back then when I was in high school, I really felt like as if it's like hard to get there because I'm not noticing it as much because I'm repressing that particular factor in the psyche. And because I'm not noticing it, because I'm repressing it, because I'm not revisiting it, I think that's something that a lot of savior feelers are prioritizing, is actually revisiting the emotions, which then leads to being able to talk about it more quickly. It's something that you are constantly reprocessing. And so because you're reprocessing it, I mean, this might be an ugly, messy way of describing it, but from a neuroscience perspective, maybe those particular pieces of circuitry are being trafficked a little more heavily. So it's easy to fall into that pattern of processing something that you've already been processing. I think that makes conceptual sense. Who knows if the details are right? Hell yeah, that's an ENTP problem right there, especially ENTP with double activated NEFE. In any case, you see these savior feelers who are able to very easily talk through their emotions, meaning that they are paying attention to their emotions, meaning that they are revisiting and working through their emotions. Well, what is the point of emotions? I know that's a very strange NT kind of thing to say, but, and this is not something that is new, this is not something that I am contributing as an original contribution. I'm sure that I've unconsciously absorbed this from somewhere else. I know people talk about this kind of stuff all the time. Feelings are sort of, here he is slowing down, trying to figure out what the feeling is. Feelings tell you something. They contain information. And so if you are able to sit with them, if you are able to revisit them, explore them, then you can extract out the information that's within them. This information will tell you something about either what matters to you, what doesn't matter to you, things you would like to approach versus avoid. Probably a bunch of stuff that I don't even know about because I'm not thinking about this stuff, but these feelings contain information. Now, people who are savior feeling, who are thinking about this stuff constantly, regularly, well, if you start to think through your feelings and you start to access the information that they're telling you, then suddenly you can kind of compress these experiences you're having. I felt hurt then, I felt hurt then, I felt hurt then. What is it all telling me? You can compress all of that information into something like a value, something like a priority. And once you start doing that more and more, then you can start to slot these things into a hierarchy. And so that is where I think a key misunderstanding happens to lie. People don't fully understand, well, there's a distinction to be made, between feeling and value. And I think that it's only for the savior thinkers that the feeling function gets equated or conflated with emotionality. And that's not to say that sometimes actual savior feelers can't be really emotional. I just mean in general, I don't think they're going to have that same sort of phenomenon where the feeling is something that happens to you. In psychological types, one thing that Jung says is that the unconscious functions or the inferior functions or the repressed functions have the quality of something that happens to you. Like I said earlier, that's how I experience my emotions. I've talked about it in another video. I feel like I'm in a cabin working on my little NT puzzle, and then all of a sudden some storm outside, some emotional storm externally rages on and thwarts me in my puzzling process within the cabin, ruining the introverted thinking procedure. That's one way of looking at it. Perhaps there are more, who knows? Yeah, if you focus on your emotions, you can start to discern patterns within the emotions. You can discern things that you may want to approach, you may want to avoid. You could sort of compress that information into a zip folder of your values. You can start to even rank these values. And I think that is truly the gift of the savior feelers, and especially the lead feelers. I don't know, I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I think that this is a nice early attempt to make some sense of things. So in any case, let me know what you think about these really rough observations. By the way, what do you think about my new glasses? I know it looks like I'm wearing welding glasses or something, and they have a nice little purple reflecting. All right, well, that was a video, perhaps. So we'll see. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.